Welcome to the other side of the table, where we talk about everyday workplace and experiences from both sides. The people leading the work and the people doing the work, because where you sit changes how things look. My name is Keith. Welcome to the first episode of my video podcasting journey. I started this podcast because I believe work gets better when people understand each other. And when that happens, people don't just perform better, they become better versions of themselves. I've been on both sides of the table. I've worked with teams and I've worked alongside leaders, and I've seen how the exact same situation can be completely different depending on where you sit. This series is about closing that gap and making sense of what really happens at work. The first topic for this video podcast is goal settings. My dear friend, who will actually be my regular co-host on future episodes, asked me, why did you choose that as your first topic? And the reason I chose this as my first topic is because this podcast is a goal I set for myself. And I'll be honest, it is exciting, but it's also uncomfortable. I've thought about doing this for a while. I've had the ideas, I've had the perspective, but deciding to actually start, to commit publicly, that was different. When you set the goal publicly, it creates pressure, it creates expectation. There's a part of you that wonders, what if I can't sustain this? What if it's not good enough? What if I lose momentum? And that tension made me realize something. Every goal sounds inspiring when you're the one setting it, but it feels very different when you're the one carrying it out. And right now, I am feeling both. I'm the one who set this goal, and I'm the one who has to live up to it. So instead of asking if setting goals are good or bad, maybe the better question is, why do we need to set goals? And why do they feel so different depending on where we sit? Let me speak from the leadership side for a moment. Not as a theory, but as someone who currently manages a team and who has had the opportunity to lead managers as well. When you're responsible for outcomes, not just tasks, but results, goals feel necessary. They create direction, they create alignment, they reduce ambiguity. Without goals, performance conversations, they become vague. Without targets, accountability, they feel subjective. Without metrics, progress is hard to measure. There's also something energizing about setting goals. When you see potential in a team, when you see what could be possible, it's exciting to define a target and say, let's go team, let's make this happen. Or, we exceeded our goal last year, we can surely hit our new goal this year. From a leadership perspective, goals, they represent growth. They represent ambition, they represent forward movement. Just a quick segue, whenever I hear the word forward movement, I'm reminded of a line from Milton Robinson, keep moving forward. And I think that's exactly how leaders set goals. Now, going back to the topic, setting goals from leadership perspective, as I was saying, goals represent growth, they represent ambition, they represent forward movement. When you're focused on outcome, you can unintentionally underestimate the emotional weight of execution. It's easy to say this is achievable, or we can do this, or no trouble at all. It's different to be the one managing the day, adjusting priorities, and absorbing pressure to achieve it. As a leader, you're thinking about sustainability, long-term direction, and expectations from above. But your team might just be thinking about survival. From where I sit as a leader, goals feel like gratitude. I've learned that from someone else, they can feel like it's the weight or a burden. Now that we've heard leadership perspective, let's try to sit on the other side of the table where regular employees sit. The truth is, I'm still an employee. I still report to someone. I still receive goals. I still have to figure out how to achieve these goals cascaded by my manager. And when you're on the other side, it really feels different. When a new target is announced, my first reaction is not always inspiration. Sometimes it's calculation. What does this mean for my workload, for my team? What will I have to prioritize? How will this affect my current responsibilities? Sometimes it's concern. If I miss this goal, how will that reflect on me? The senior leadership, do they fully understand what it takes to achieve this? Because goals, they don't just measure performance. They can feel like they measure identity. If the numbers are good, I'm competent. If the numbers fall short, am I? They become like scorecards attached to your name. And when you're not part of the conversation where the goal was decided, it can feel imposed, even if it was well-intentioned. So I leave both reactions. I've set ambitious goals, felt energized, and I received ambitious goals and felt stretched. Same concept, completely different emotional experience. If I felt inspired setting goals and stretched receiving them, then where's the disconnect happening? I really don't think the gap is in the goal itself. I think the gap is in the why. There's a book I read called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. In it, he talks about how people respond more to purpose than instruction, and that applies to goal setting too. Leaders often communicate the what, increase performance, efficiency, hit this number. But clarity of the what isn't clarity of the why. Leaders see strategy, employees feel workload. If you don't understand why something matters, it feels like pressure. But when you understand why something matters, it can feel meaningful, worthwhile. Perspective changes emotional weight. And perspective is built through communication, through context. As a leader, I've had to learn to explain the why more clearly. Not just because it sounds good, but because it changes how people experience the work. And in this discussion, the goal. And as an employee, I've had to learn to ask for the why instead of silently assuming pressure. Maybe the goal itself isn't the problem. Maybe the missing perspective is. So before we end, I want to acknowledge something uncomfortable, because if we really are going to talk about both sides of the table, we have to be honest about both sides. Sometimes goals are ego-driven or driven by investor pressure. Sometimes stretch targets are influenced by reputation, wanting to prove something to leaders or to the market. And sometimes leaders don't admit uncertainty. They present confidence because they feel they're supposed to. Now here's the other side. Sometimes resistance isn't about workload. Sometimes it's about fear. Fear of failure. Fear of exposure. Fear of being measured. Sometimes people reject a goal even before trying. Not because it's impossible, but because it's uncomfortable. And sometimes we underestimate our own capacity to grow. None of this makes either side belong. It just makes us human. So maybe the next time a goal is set, whether you're the one setting it or the one receiving it, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, am I reacting from where I sit, or have I tried to understand the other side of the table? Because sometimes the biggest gap at work isn't effort, but perspective. Thanks for spending a few minutes with me today. If this topic felt familiar, you're definitely not alone, and that's exactly why the podcast exists. I'm Keith, and this is The Other Side of the Table. I'll see you in the next episode.